Hello. Anyone around here speak basketball?
This is Abby Silver.
Vision 6-9. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Confederacy of Dunks Basketball
Podcast.
I am your host, Freddie Rivas, who is contractually obliged to say Vision 6-9 for a couple more episodes. And who on the other side are you?
Freddie, I'm your producer. My name is Matt Duncan. I'm running the Confederacy of Dunks podcast on Raptors Republic. And how are you doing with our boy Kyle Lowry back in the finals?
Yeah. I'm very happy for Kyle. I won't and I can't root for Miami. They are a glamour market. Can't do it.
Yeah.
But I'm very, very happy for Kyle. I love both teams, Nuggets and 5. But
Oh.
yeah, we're going to talk about it more. Maddie, let me just before we dive into the pod, you're a hardcore Leafs fan. Dubas fired.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy in Leafland right now. Dubas is gone. We don't know what's going to happen. Shanahan's throwing down that Mimico attitude that I grew up knowing. You don't want to cross some Mimico dude, man.
This is a Mimico attitude
It's a Mimico.
pod. We're a Raptors podcast. We're NBA podcast. We'll be leading with NBA today. We're with Raptors Republic. Let's get into it. Okay, I'm gonna stick with you, Adon, for this next question here. You actually threw it in the thread before the pod. So give me any thoughts you have on. We'll just do sort of a quick thing on any thoughts you have on Bob Myers resigning, as well as of the 3 coaching vacancies that have been filled. I think there's still 3 more: Detroit, Phoenix, and Toronto. But so we have Adrian Griffin with the Bucks, Nick Nurse with the 76ers, and Ime Udoka with the Rockets. Of those 3, like, who are you the most optimistic about? And what's your thoughts on Bob Myers resigning?
Yeah. So Bob Myers, it kind of ties in, like we were talking about just before, how I have zero expertise on coaching. Like, these guys are at a level of intellect, and like I think there's so much more at play than I understand. So I have a limited perspective. But what I do think is that for me, there's 2 really important things. One is long-termedness. I mean, again, if we look at Miami and Denver, those 2 coaches are 2 of the longest tenured in the league. I think it's like Popovich, and I'm not even sure who the next one would be. So I think stability really goes a long way. And this sudden, short-sightedness as far as coaching goes and immediate expectations, I think is a poor way to approach building a winning franchise.
Yeah.
And then the other part is, I think you got to make the players happy. Like, I think there are circumstances where it's the institution, the coach goes first. And I think Miami's a pretty good example. But at the end of the day, the players got to be happy. So with that being said, I think the Adrian Griffin signing to Milwaukee is the best. And bottom line, it's because Giannis wanted it. And if Giannis wants it, and I think Griffin's a cool dude. He's an ex-NBA player. He looks like he has a chill vibe. From what I've heard, he's a thoughtful, like, intellectual coach. So I think for a veteran team like Milwaukee, it's all about just having those vibes fit. So I think that's the best signing. I don't know about Nurse and Embiid, to be honest. Like, that's like the opposite of vibes fitting. I feel like their vibes are at other ends of the spectrum. So it's going to be interesting to see how that looks. And I definitely don't think James Harden and Nick Nurse are compatible either. So I wonder about that situation. And then just quickly on Myers, I think Myers kind of outgrew his position. Maybe like it seems like he wants bigger and better things. Is that indicative of an era change in Golden State? I don't know. Remains to be seen. But kind of just seems like Myers was ready to go.
Yeah, and I think it ties in well to era, right? The Warriors sort of. I mean, I think a dynasty will happen again. Like that's sort of the flow of the NBA. And even if it's a long time before there's another dynasty, I do think that like what the Warriors did will definitely stand the test of time. And Myers leaving, I think, even if it's not like a big sort of, even if it doesn't feel like a big moment, I think it will end up being a big one. Although I will just add, I do think, just to sort of jump back to the parity thing real quick, I do think that Jokic is set up and Denver are set up to be very good for a long time. And I think the West, I don't know, I feel like a lot of teams are on the decline in the West. So, but yeah, that's just a little aside. But yeah, I agree with you on all the coaches. I feel like Griffin is mine. Your main point is salient to me. Like it's a coach where, or it's a league where players have such a say, and how they interact with the coach really, really matters. So the fact that he's sort of has the blessing of Giannis, is huge, and B, players clearly seem to like him. Well, I think that's a major thing in the league. It's not college. You can't sort of boss players around and say, I know best, just do what I say. Like that just doesn't really fly. I think Raptors fans know that well with the last year or two of Nurse.
Yeah, and I think like it depends too, if it's Houston, I think you do need that a little bit more. And I think Ime is probably going to provide that, like structure, strictness, like buy in or get out kind of thing. But with Milwaukee, you know what you have, right? Like they have won it all with the collection of players they have, and assuming they're running it back, it's going to be tweaks and stuff. So I don't think you can really go wrong with whoever you sign, so long as like you're saying, like there's like a cohesion there from the get-go.
Yeah, and to touch on what one of your other points too. I think the Bud firing was one of the more interesting firings to me. Like I every time I hear sort of like, oh, this timeout was bad or this adjustment was bad, it's just hard for me not to look at like Bud's regular season and playoff record and championship, even with Atlanta, and sort of see a coach that's really talented. But yeah, again, I'm sure there's so much I don't know, and I think it could be as simple as Giannis being like, I'd like a new coach, and then that's sort of that. Okay, Chelsea, I hope we didn't take all the points, but yeah, what's your thoughts on Myers and the coaches and the fit?
Yeah, the first thing I would like to say is that I guessed that Nick Nurse was going to go to Philadelphia a month ago. So I
saw that. Yeah, that was huge.
I guessed. I was right. But anyway, and honestly, like I was just guessing that mostly out of like, that would be funny. And then it happened. So, but I honestly thought that Nurse was going to go either to the Bucks or to the Suns, honestly. And my thought process with the Suns was that like his first year in Toronto, you had like Kawhi Leonard, you had like these big like names and a lot of pressure, which I feel like the Suns also have.
Mm-hmm.
They just got KD, they have, they're on the back end of Chris Paul, they have Devin Booker, all those like young people that they have so much potential, and people have just been waiting for it for a couple of years, which I feel like the Raptors were kind of in that same like cusp as Nick Nurse came in. So I was like, oh, that might be a good fit. He might be able to like repeat his like glory or whatever.
Right.
And then with the Bucks, again, like I just thought like, again, you have a group of really talented people. And then you have, this coach that has like a determined winning, record. He has a championship, whatever. And it's also kind of, I think, from that area, like of geographically. And so I thought that was a good fit too. And I agree that the Philadelphia fit is maybe the least likely and the least kind of like when you think about it logistically. I did hear that Embiid and Nurse like met and it went well. So like, I don't know. Again, there's so much that like we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're literally just getting the like this person interviewed and this person interviewed. And I think out of a lot of things in the NBA, I do think they keep these coaching searches like the most under wraps for whatever reason. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how he interacts with Embiid and how he reacts with Harden. I think the Harden thing might be even a little bit more interesting because you know that Harden doesn't really have like that like loyalty to teams that maybe like Embiid or Giannis or like, you know, others may have because he's moved around so much. So I'm very curious to see like, is Harden going to request a trade at some point? Is Embiid going to request a trade? Like how long this experiment, I guess, that they're going into will last. And you're right. We're in an era where coaches literally have like a season, if that, to prove themselves. And then, you know, there's so many different candidates out there that are like ready and that they could take their pick of that. They're like, oh, you didn't work, you're gone. You know, there's so many other people we could pick from. So it's definitely an interesting era. And I do think like the Adrian Griffin to the Bucks thing is also very interesting too. Because I didn't expect them to go for a first-time coach. I kind of expected them to pick someone who, you know, has a experience being a head coach. And maybe that was Giannis's choice because, you know, he wants to, I wouldn't say like mold his own coach, but, you know, you think of teams like Giannis, you think of Embiid, you think of, you know, these players who have a lot of say. And like, we were talking about this about the W too. You know, I don't know how many people listening to this will get this reference, but like when the Phoenix Mercury were thinking of a coach, it was like who Diana Taurasi wanted and who would play the style of what Diana Taurasi wanted. So I think that's kind of the same situation with the Bucks and, you know, him wanting a coach that would play this or the style of basketball that he would want. And I mean, yeah, good for it's also good press for the Raptors too. You think of all these coaches that have been in our coaching system that are now being considered for these jobs, and even coaches that were in our coaching system in previous who have gone to other places or are coming back and are being considered for our position. I think it just like says good things about our franchise, and you know, good for Adrian Griffin for being able to, you know, break that next barrier in his career. And I mean, you know, when I heard him speak about basketball, he seems very knowledgeable, and you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what he looks like as like a full-time head coach.
Do we call it the Dwayne Casey coaching tree?
I guess.
I think we do, and it's so funny because I mean, like I know that's like sort of a joke, but like I also feel like the Casey effect is this roundly dismissed thing. I'm getting on my soapbox here a little bit, but like I think the Raptors collective is just like, yeah, Casey sucks. Everything he did is bad. And it's sort of this like there's this attitude towards DeMar and Dwayne Casey often that I find just so out of touch, you know. Yeah, I mean, like I think you have to be able to take the things that they did bad and sort of like let that influence you, but also you know, Nurse was an assistant of Casey for what? 5 years? 4 years. So yeah, if we're talking tree, like I think that's how that works, right? I remember when Casey first got fired, he made allusions to Nurse using parts of his playbook in an interview. So, you know, I mean, Casey obviously I don't think was too happy about that situation, but anyways, that's my Casey soapbox.
Do we think that Nick Nurse's name was brought up in Detroit at all? Whatsoever.
With Casey being the GM? Absolutely.
Hell no.
I know. I wrote a little thing today about Nick getting that new job, and I was like, yeah, we can all assume why he wasn't at all brought up in the Detroit search. Like nobody needs to talk about it. It's just,
Casey was probably like, listen, if you can bring back The Rock, if you can find a way to bring The Rock into Detroit, we'll talk.
Yeah. He's probably like, let's interview him just so we can say no.
Yeah. Or he interviews him and he has that, like, what's that, like the shot thing, NARM or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And everything he says, he's just like, that's a lie. I don't even, is it called NARM? I didn't stick the landing on that joke, but you guys know what I mean. Chelsea, I'm going to go to you. And this is a Raptors question. And I mean, I think there's a lot of things that people want to see and a lot of questions we have, but yeah, for whatever reason, I'll just let you sort of go in whatever direction you want. what's your biggest question or questions about the Raptors offseason? But I'm sort of looking for like a catalyst. Like, what's something that you think is going to kind of set the tone for everything else?
Yeah, I mean, I was writing about this last week where I was trying to do like player reviews and like what the future of certain players would be, but it's so hard to think about the future of this franchise without knowing what like their vibe is for the next like 3 years, you know? And I think the biggest question of the offseason is for the front office and the franchise, the organization, whatever, to figure out which road they're going to go down, whether they're going to go down the like development, we're going to draft high picks, we're going to develop these young people, we're going to give away our biggest assets and get something in return in terms of young people, or if they're going to go down the route of like, we want to make the playoffs, we want to be a contending team. So we're going to invest in the people that we have, and we're going to try and get good pieces back. And we're not going to play this whole draft lottery game for the next couple of years. And so for me, like, it's so hard to think about, you know, who we draft, what we do, who we trade, who we keep, what money goes where without knowing which one of those roads that the team is going to go down. So for me, it's like, I feel like not only will the coach be a determination of that, but I think the bigger factor is going to be like our free agency and like leading up to the draft, and like if any trades happen before the draft. If they trade up for number 3, then obviously, you know, they're going in the development route. And if they don't, and they just keep 13 and they go into free agency the way that they're going into it right now, then you know that they're going to try and contend. And for me, that's like the deciding factor and like the biggest question going into it, because right now we don't really have a sense of like what this franchise is all about. And I mean, knowing Masai and knowing his kind of style, I personally think that he might go into the contender route, but also he might not be given that choice because his free agents might just walk, you know? So, yeah, it's definitely a weird time where it's hard to predict the future. And this offseason is really big for that.
Yeah, well said. And I think, you know, I want to jump on your last point, because I think knowing Masai, right, you know, there's what would fans want, and there's, you know, the different camps of as far as direction, et cetera. And there's also the Portland rumors, which were a big deal last summer as well, right? But I think, you know, Masai has sort of indicated that he feels like free agency is, you know, via trades, and, you know, he traded away the draft pick for next year and got Pirtle. So it seems like he's more interested in being competitive. You know, back to the beginning of the pod, Parity, he brought that up a bunch of times. But I think what you said in the last sort of, you know, your last point about the free agents walking, like, I think as a Raptors fan, we have an example. We have examples of both retaining free agents and free agents walking. And I think that really is going to set the tone. The coach as well, for sure. But to me, it's Fred. I think if Fred does a sign and trade or leaves or whatever, this team, you know, the Fred and Siakam duo, everything about it, I think, is just like permanently altered. And I think if Fred comes back, I feel like there's going to be a lot of, even if Fred came back and Pirtle and Gary walked, there's still there's still more continuity. But I think if Fred is gone for any reason, then that to me is sort of the biggest question. And then, you know, then you can, I mean, we'll talk about it more later, like in future podcasts, but that comes down to like, what are you willing to pay Fred? Are any of these teams going to sort of throw him a lot of money? We know that that's been a rumor in the past that hasn't happened, but maybe it does this time. Yeah, Aiden, what's your sort of biggest questions heading into the offseason? Or I mean, in the offseason.
I'm the same with Chelsea. It's like, what road do they want to go down? The one thing I will kind of disagree with you, Freddie, is I think that Freddie could be an opportunity for like a micro reset, right? Like, Pirtle really is kind of the curveball here. That's like, if we acquired Pirtle, then why would we do a full reset?
Right.
I do think that if they feel like they hit their heads on the ceiling, letting Freddie go and maybe getting something back for him, and then finding a new identity with this team, with Pascal still being the focal point, is a likelihood. But I think generally what's interesting to me is, and you mentioned this, how Masai talked a lot about parity, and kind of like everybody's kind of waiting in the weeds to jump on an opportunity to make a run. And Miami is a perfect example, right? And as an executive, you can look at Miami in two ways. You could say, oh, that could be us. Like, we're one piece away. Like, all we got to do is figure out how to get that one piece. Or you could look at it and say, everybody else is looking at Miami thinking it's their us. Now it's arbitrage for us to leverage that one piece and trade it away to other teams. So I would be curious to see how Masai looks at that. He could use OG, for example, or Freddie, either one, or Gary for that matter. He could use any one of those three and trade them to a team who really feels like they're this close. The Kings would be a perfect example, right? Like, if he could trade OG to the Kings for a ton, maybe he'll do that. And so I think I think the biggest question is what road, but I'm just really curious about how, and Masai's always looking for that arbitrage, and I'm just kind of curious how he's going to approach that.
Yeah, I know it's a good point. I think sort of my guiding light with Messiah has always been that, he doesn't like to operate when he doesn't have a lot of leverage. So that's why, what happened at the deadline didn't surprise me. When we didn't trade Kyle at the deadline, Tampa didn't surprise me. So, but yeah, I think that's sort of what's interesting about this period for the Raptors is, like you said, well, if everyone's, being like, I could be like Miami, maybe besides looking at our team and being like, yeah, but we could also be like Chicago. So let's Pascal's got a solid, 3 or 4 years of being like a fantastic player. So, maybe let's trade OG or Fred and bring in some younger talent / established players. Cause that was a rumor in the trade deadline as well, right? He doesn't just want draft picks. Like, he doesn't want a bunch of players that need development time. Like, I think he wants sort of ready-made players as well. But yeah, good points all around. Chelsea, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the whole Miami aspect of it. Like, the way that they just kind of came in from the play-in, were super close to losing to Chicago, who Chicago probably would have ended up losing in the first round. And now we're in the finals. I feel like Masai is going to take that and be like, that could be me. And run with it, because again, the playoffs are very different, as we've all seen from this year, from the regular season. So, I mean, as long as you can get a spot in the playoffs, the world is your oyster, I guess, to use a cliche term. But yeah, and I could see obviously we don't know, we say we know him, but we don't know him. But knowing the way that his mind operates sometimes, I definitely could see him going the route of, okay, let's keep as much as we can. Let's make a run. Let's try to be Miami. Let's do that. Right. And I do think the comparisons of Miami and Toronto as two franchises are, valid. So I could see how he could compare himself in terms of that. So I agree.
Yeah. Plus that value of continuity, which I think we really underestimate. And again, Denver, their core have been together for a long time, or at least they're top two. Miami, similar, and the Raptors have that. And we can argue about what their ceiling is, and I think a lot of the naysayers will say that we very clearly know it. But I just don't think that growth or that process is linear. And if internally they feel like we're that close, that could just be, like you're saying, Chelsea, that Miami inspiration could be it. We just need that one more piece. Everybody's kind of hitting the peak of their powers all simultaneously. Let's run this back. I could see that being a thing. I thought that's what this year was going to be like, to be honest. But
it seems completely valid, honestly. And don't get me wrong, it's going to cause a lot of people on Twitter going like, this team, blah, 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 which is going to happen no matter what you do. Like, I feel like, and obviously they're not going to take that into stock because they are, the people of the franchise and not people on Twitter. But I personally think that it's completely valid. And like anybody on Twitter is like, blow it all up. I'm like, I get that side of your point of view as well. But I do think it's completely logical to, especially seeing what we just saw in terms of Miami's run this year, completely logical to do.
Question for you both. Do you think the coach that we sign will be an indicator of what path we take, or do you think those are not necessarily connected?
Yes and no. I do think, with Nurse, it was, when they hired Nurse, it was like, okay, he has a lot of run with the franchise, but he's also new and fresh and whatever. I do think like the emphasis on which coach will be, I don't know, if they get someone who's familiar with the franchise, say like Sergio, for example, if they bring Sergio back, I think it'll be an indicator of them wanting to contend and have a guy who knows these guys on a somewhat personal level. And then I also think if they get someone like super, super fresh, maybe they're going in the route of development.
Yeah, for me, I've said this a long time, or a lot about Casey, but I think a big part of the sort of Masai Casey dynamic versus the Masai Nurse dynamic is that Casey's job was never fully secure, and I think that whoever Masai brings in is there to execute Masai's vision, and there's going to be like no going rogue and complaining about bench players. Like I think whoever's there is, like, yes, it's collaborative, but Masai is their boss, and I think that whoever comes in, that I would be really surprised if it was like a D'Antoni type. If it was someone who came in who was like, Masai, leave me alone. Like, I think whoever comes in is going to be a guy that's like, all right, let's make Scotty work. Let's blah, blah, blah. Like, let's do this. You know what I mean? Let's make your vision a reality. Yeah. So that's sort of like, in that sense, so I don't think it, like, to answer your question, I don't think it's an indication unless there's an extreme sort of like, like stylistic personality that comes in. But yeah, I'll just add, back to what we were saying before, thinking about us as Miami. I just heard a wild fact that Kevin Love, every time he's been in the playoffs, has made the finals. So we just got to make sure we pick up Kevin Love next year, and I think things will be all right. But yeah, that does it for the pod. Thank you both so much. We'll bring Maddie back in. But yeah, tell us what's going on, Adon. What's up? I know you're writing and you're doing the wrap up, but I mean, there's no games right now. But are you going to do sort of more kind of like evergreen material?
Yeah, Oren and I text each other. I get mad about something, and then we agree we should talk about it. So keep an eye out for the quote unquote summer editions of the wrap up. And then similarly, anytime I get mad or think of something, I'll write about it. But there's no constant output right now with the off season. So just keep an eye out on Raptors Republic. There's lots of good stuff going on anyway. That's not me. So
cool. Keep your eyes peeled for Adon getting mad. You know what I mean? Chelsea, what's up? What do you what's going? I mean, lots going on, but what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to follow what we're doing on Raptors HQ as well, that's fun. We're writing about a bunch of off-season content and getting some stuff out there, so that's fun. And then on the comedy side, I post shows, and Freddie and I are doing a show again on Saturday, and I have a couple other things coming up. So that's a bunch of fun if you're in Toronto. And then if you're into women's basketball, obviously because of the season is happening right now, I'm doing like a whole bunch of women's basketball pieces and live streams and podcasts and all of that fun stuff. So if you're into the WNBA, then now's a good time to follow that stuff.
Yeah, amazing. Maddie, why don't you take us away here? What do you want to let the people know?
Thanks for listening. You can go to raptorsrepublic.com. You can listen to the full podcast there. If you were watching on YouTube, thanks for if you did check out the clips there, like and subscribe. And yeah, just hit those podcatchers. We really appreciate it. You can also check us out at dunkspodcast.com. And as always, make sure you check out the paywall for the writers like Adon, $6 a month. They write really good stuff and they need our support. So opt in, folks, opt in, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Right on. Maddie, if you feel like we're done, we're good to go, please just give me those words I love so much. Okay.
Listen to full episodes of the Confederacy of Dunks only on the Rapcast.